Hello, welcome to another Waking Class podcast. I just watched the last one and I've seen after the countdown that we're staring at the screen like this. So I tried to jump in, but I think the same thing is going to happen again today. So yeah, apologies for that. So today's a continuation. I'm really excited to have John and Susan join us today because we've got to the point where we really want to get to the meat of what happens in quantum healings and people's experiences. And John and Susan have been in a client and practitioner sessions with some mind-blowing experiences, and we're hopefully going to share some today. John, you're already well. Susan, I know Susan through our meetups and Zoom calls with other practitioners. She's almost like a perfect spiritual person when you imagine it. She talks with so much knowledge, so much honesty, an excellent vocabulary, and probably what I think someone on a journey is like. If it's almost like so ideal person. And when she listens, when she talks and I listen, there's such a truth to it. So I'm really excited to listen to, even if I've heard something before, I'm really looking forward to hearing again too. Because yeah, I only wish I could talk with that much eloquency and knowledge because, we read something, we experience something and we forget it and then try to put words to it. And I'm just not that good at it, but Susan is. So today's going to be a fantastic episode. So welcome, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you.
No worries.
Appreciate that.
Okay, I'm going to let John take over now, and let's go with this. Let's see what happens.
Okay, thanks very much, Cam. So we actually spoke about my session that I had with Susan the last time on the podcast, the one where I was actually the client. So I told that story, but I listened back to the questions, the answers my higher self gave to me that day, and it just reminded me how important it is for clients to listen back to the information, because I I get reminded of some fantastic information that my higher self gave me that day that I'm like, forgot that. I really need to act on that almost. Or it's a bit of detail that I need to remember going forward. It gave me a bit of information about my daughter that I'd asked a question about her and again. I'm like, I forgot about that. I'll need to tell her. Oh, it was a real wake up call for me. I did it this morning, actually early this morning, and I got to the questions and I remembered most of the session, but I hadn't remembered the answers my higher self gave me, and it was great. And Susan, you took us through such a powerful session, and you were the first person that had actually told me to set an intention for it, to kind of go and explore what I'm out there or more of what I've been, and that was intention, and that's very much what we got. We get soul retrieval and different energy experiences. So we kind of spoke about that in the other one, but I just thought it was worth saying, reminding people about going and listen to their answers again and listen to the sessions when they've been a client, because it was a wake up call for me this morning.
I actually really agree with that point. My first session I ever did going into regression was April 2020. As I've listened incrementally to it over that 12, 18 months that it's been now, each time I listen to it, I actually hear something different. It's like whatever I'm ready to hear, that, like the higher self brings it through, but we're not always ready to hear it at that point in time, but we grow into it, and therefore different parts of what is said comes through with a different meaning. And there's been so many epiphanies where I've gone, oh yeah, I actually didn't pick that up previously, and here I am now, and I understand that now. So I do, yeah, I completely agree that listening back to the session is so valuable over and over the months that come forward.
Yeah, I think from my experience, a lot of clients don't listen to it, and it is deeply healing. And even if you are consciously aware and think you remember everything, you don't. When I listen to the ones I've had done on me, I still like incredulous. Like, did I say that? But yeah, maybe there's a bit of fear attached to it. So things are revealed and people probably weren't ready to hear them. Yeah, I agree. Listen to the sessions.
So that was great this morning. So to go on to our session, I think I was the client first in the morning, and then with your session in the afternoon. Uh, and I suppose before we even get into it, it was the kind of breakthrough session for me, that made me believe that I should be doing QHHT and sort of saying, right, if I can deal with that, although I was very much a novice, kind of learning on the job, and I did make some mistakes, but we got through it, and it turned out that I think we resolved the situations that we were in. So, do you want me to just start telling the story, Susan? You happy with that?
Please,
Go
please.
ahead. Okay. So, you set the intention for yourself before it of jump in it if I don't get this right, but it was along the lines of discovering why you feel as if your talents or abilities are being limited on earth at the moment in this existence, and you felt as if there might be something blocking you, and you wanted to go and explore that. You felt as if you should be able to do more, although you're very talented. You felt as if you should be able to do more. So that was intention. We went into it, the usual process of the script and coming off the cloud, but I think we might even have just got to your beautiful place, but you were in a horrible place. It was like dark, and you were getting bubbles fired at you. You were seeing sort of extreme angles. It was a kind of confusion, chaotic scene. And you said eventually that it was your inner consciousness. And I was very much an novice at that point, thinking, how do I move her on, or how do I resolve this situation? And you were just seeing teeth parts that was kind of scary, and you were seeing close-ups of skin of an animal that looked like you were seeing hair follicles, and it was just nothing was really joining together to make me go. I was looking for something to grab onto to then move it along, and we never really could. But I said to you at one point, this needs to be removed for your consciousness, and you said, it definitely does. So it's funny that I'm telling this story with you here, Kam, because the technique I used came from you on the very first day that I met you, about using love to resolve a situation. So I kind of asked Susan, I badly worded it, and yeah, I had to repeat it, but I said, are you feeling emotion in this situation? Are you able to feel emotion? Can you send love towards this scene? And you said, I think I can. And a spark of light appeared in the middle of it. And we were able to just keep sending love towards the situation, and more light kind of came into it. And it calmed down a bit. It never really took us out of anywhere that we kind of breathed a sigh of relief and went, oof, that was over. But it just allowed us to go, right, I think for me as a practitioner, I thought, we've escaped that situation that was like, we brought some calm to the chaos, I suppose. So had I had more experience at that point, I think I would have started asking you questions, but I just moved you on. And I think that was one of the mistakes I made, but it just took you back into another horrible situation. So you were then on a sort of operating table, kind of strapped to an operating table. And you were like, there's something jagging into my feet. So I was having to then use a bit of script to say, you don't need to feel anything. But you were then saying, they're stitching something into me. It was almost like energy was being stitched into you to sort of suppress you. And you were just getting lots of horrible feelings. You were getting stinging, tingling feelings all over your back and things like that, and your feet in particular. And I'm just trying to have to reassure you that you weren't having to feel any pain, but well, you obviously were. And again, I'm kind of thinking, how the hell do I resolve this? I'm looking for the wee hook that's going to move it on or get it out. But then you were saying there's an alien presence here. That I can see aliens, and you were like, you describe the shape of a head, but you said it's almost like looking at ants under a microscope. So it was, I said, it's like big insects type of things. You said, insects, and they're crawling all over me and kind of smothering the light. So it was like, how are we going to get you out of this? But you came out with a phrase yourself, and you said, they've trapped me. And I said, so who's trapped you? Or why have they trapped you? And you're like, to hide my light. And then you said the trap was being sent to Earth. They sent me to Earth because they didn't want me working on the other side. So I was like, oh my goodness. So at that point, it was exploring. We were trying to explore who you were, or I was trying to explore who you were on the other side. And you were creation. I am creation. And they're limiting creation by trapping the light. And so they sent me to Earth to sort of get me out the road. That was basically, you never said that, that's my words. But they sent you to Earth to get you out the road because you were such a sort of, try to choose the right words. You were organising the galactics. That you did use that word. You were organising the galactics on the other side. So this was coming through as you were lying there, and I'm just like, oh my God, how do I get? But even though you were saying all that kind of stuff, you were still going, yeah, I'm thinking, right, how do I get her out of this? But I mean, it went on a lot longer, as you can imagine. There was lots of horrible things going on, and you were describing other things, but you gave me that, so I'm like, okay, so that's almost, we were getting your answer of why your power was somehow subdued on Earth, because you're a big deal in the astral, or an aspect of you was a big deal in the astral. But they're like, let's get her out the road, send her to Earth, keep her confined, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And this was only about my 7th session. I'm getting something like this, and I was loving it, but kind of terrified at the same time. But again, I'm looking for a breadcrumb to somehow get you out. And you said something like, I must ask you something. You said, oh, the dragons of the light. I've seen them all. They came recently, and I went, all right, hang on. We need to bring in something like that. And at that point, I just kind of went with it, and it was like I started bringing light, and it was the Silver River meditation gave me the inspiration. But I'd used something like that, like this with Michelle, a previous client. But bringing light in through your crown and using Gaia to bring light in through your feet. I had light coming in through Source and light coming in through Gaia, and I was trying to beam light to you. I was like representing humanity, trying to beam light and love to you to try and release that situation. And then I brought in the archangels to do the heavy lifting on that side. So I brought in Michael and Uriel and Gabriel. That was the 3 that came to kind of rolled off my tongue when I was thinking about it. There might have been other appropriate ones, but so that it was almost like it almost became a channeling for me, because as you can hear me speaking, I'm stopping and starting and and on. But I'd almost about 3 minutes of just this dialogue that came out of me telling you where the light was coming from and where the light was going to, and sending you love, and the archangels were doing the work on that side, and we were doing it here, and it just flowed from me. And you, at that point, you were starting to just become at peace on the bed, so you weren't feeling the pain or anything like that. And eventually said, how are you feeling? And you said, I've been lifted up to the sort of, I'm in a healing chamber. And you mentioned the dragons again. And you said, I'm being scanned up here. And you were, at that point, you were just starting to feel much better, or just, what you were telling me, you were feeling a lot better at that point. And I asked it, I said, is there any presences there with you? And you said, oh, I think the dragons are about, and there's someone else here. It's most just like the light sort of scanning through me. But then I got you, later on, you almost just offered a bit more, saying, oh, it's like a crystal spire that I'm in. And I've got amethysts at my feet. And you kind of, it was almost like you'd been taken to the halls of healing. And it was like surrounded by crystals, and you were being scanned and rescued from that situation. And I'm just trying to think if there's any that kind of brought it to an end. That sort of that was like your past life experiences. Obviously not past lives, but that was the past life section of the session. Kind of came to an end. I thought, right, we've got her out of here. And I brought in the higher self, and then the higher self just answered the questions and sort of answered questions that you had brought along, and also allowed me to ask questions of what had been going on. And we got a lot of good answers out of that. Again, when I say a lot of good answers, probably we get one main answer that basically went along the lines of it was creation and the light being dimmed by you were getting sent here to get you out of the road of whatever you were able to do in the astral or whatever you were doing for the light. And it was the dark that sent you here. So if you go and listen to all that again, you'll hear the exact language of what your higher self told. And then at that point, we got those questions, but you did say, I'm feeling really foggy. Like you did say that at some point. I think because you've been through so much, you were maybe coming, your higher self was receding and you were coming more to the fore, and you were just like, that was quite a traumatic situation you had went through. And then I counted you, and then it was like coming to in the room for, like, I was a wee bit shell shocked, and I think you were as well.
Yeah, yeah. I remember the aftermath actually more than the actual. I've got the images running through my mind as you're talking. The aftermath of the following 24 hours of trying to move through that session, and yeah, like I remember the veins in my hands and coming down my arms were like really dark blue, and I just remember thinking it was like poison just moving through my body. It was terrifying. I went to bed terrified, and I remember I was sobbing because it was just so scary. And even the next morning, I thought, take a deep breath, I'm going to be fine. And I came out, and then as soon as someone spoke to me, I was like, oh, I can't do this. And I went back to my room because I was just like, again, it was just that processing of what it was releasing, I guess, and that energy. But then everyone just being brave enough to be around that group of people and holding space at the meetup of you phenomenal people was enough. Then I started to feel better. And I think more of the story has actually unfolded around that over the following months as I've done more regressions as well, and seeing and understanding contracts and my partner's role, even as he's come down, because he came through when we did the meet the guide meditation. He actually came through, and it was shown that he followed me down to protect me because he saw that unfolding, which I just thought was phenomenal. And he's come through a couple of times as my guide, which is really odd because he's here physically, but obviously on a spiritual level, you can be in multiple aspects of self at different times, can't you? Well, you can, I'm telling you. And so that's been really interesting. And in one of the follow-up meetups, I actually met a lady, and when I did a heart activation at the beginning of the meetup group, all I could see was her writing contracts with a light pen, and I was like, "You're writing contracts for souls coming into the planet, like, into this planet, like, that's phenomenal." And then it came through in my regression that she was actually the one that wrote the contract for, the whole situation that was unfolding around us as well, which, it just continues to blow my mind how the information comes through, and it's just, there's a part of me that 100% understands and resonates with everything that's going on. And then there's this voice in my head that goes, "You are being ridiculous. How can any of this make sense?" And this human part of my mind that's just like, no. But I know within my heart that it all feels right, and it all interconnects and awakens. And even what awoke for me from that experience, and like you're talking about the Crystal Healing Temple and how that's now integrated into my own healing practices with the clients that I work with now, and how my energy continues to unfold and interconnect. think I've thought over and over that session was such a pivotal point for me in what unfolded next. So I do think that whatever the intention was that day, you did great.
There was the word Wolfie was mentioned. Is that a pet or is that a guide? When like,
The what? Sorry, say that again.
the what you said, I think there was a presence with you in the temple, and it was Wolfie. Is that a pet? Wolfie.
Wolfie is my wolf spirit. He's with me all the time. He was actually, when I first stepped onto this journey, it was just a bit over 10 years ago. He was the first one to come to me. And I was actually working with another healer at the time because I was very unwell at that point. And she goes, "Oh, there's a wolf with you." And it really wants to be noticed. And then after he came to me, it was like everything I looked at looked like a wolf. I'd look at my quilt and I'm seeing a wolf, and I'd look at something else and I'm seeing a wolf. I just see him in my mind's eye everywhere I go, and he's just awesome. So yeah, he's always with me. But yeah, Wolfie, my greatest ally.
I suppose just to tell the rest of my experience of that day was like it was your reaction after it. Like I'm thinking, did I really go through that? Did we really just like you were saying? Did we make this stuff up? We know we don't, but at that early stage, I was still saying. But your reaction after it, it was like you were really emotional and like kind of shocked even. And I knew there's no way, Susan, anyone's going to make that up and have that emotional response that you had at the end. And then we kind of went and met the rest of the gang, kind of told the story. Again, you said, John, you tell the story, and the others were like, how did you know what to do? And I'm like, I don't know, it just kind of came out at the time. Like you gave me the clue, I think, Susan, by saying the dragons of light were around or something. I thought, okay, there we go. I'm running with that. So we need to bring light into the situation and just try to bombard you with light. And so I brought it in, however I did it. But it just kind of came.
And I think that's very testament to trusting in the moment, the wisdom, the understanding that comes to you in that moment. And, you know, I think QHHT is such a profound, I think it's the key to unlocking so much within us. But we've also got to work intuitively with our own who we are because, you know, we connect to certain people because they've got the key to unlock that something special within us in whatever way, shape, or form that is. And it's when our light comes together that the magic happens. And obviously, you were that for me that day. But yeah, just incredible.
Can I just ask on the details of this story? It's really interesting. This whole you were sent to Earth to dim your light. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit about your understanding of what that now means?
Yeah, I can. Every time I go under, I keep being shown when we talk about who we are and we ask for that, what is our higher soul mission, and in trying to unfold that story, I just keep being shown source. I'm just light. That's all they keep showing me, and they keep showing me these codes and how these codes are like creation. So channeling these codes, and it's like when I'm doing the energy work for people or when I'm in touch with people, it's kind of like I can see or feel, taste, hear. I don't know. It's like all senses, but you can connect to that distortion of what is a person's source point of truth versus where is that distortion come in, and it's no longer coherent with them living in their true source light. Does that make sense? And through that, if we can clear out that distortion, then we can pull in the light. But sometimes those codes within the etheric DNA have been so latent for so long that they don't just activate. So we channel in the codes, and I'm able to bridge the gap between, imagine an old wireframe of what has become through, you know, like we're born and reborn with the wounds of our ancestors, back into what are those codes that need to come in. And I can feel them come in then, and we work through that heart space to activate a person's light again into that remembrance. So it's all about remembering who you are again. And the more we connect back into that light, then the more we come into that oneness, that stillness that can anchor through this heart space to live and make choices and be aware in a way that is true to why we're here. And I think that's the key. So, and what John said about coordinating the galactics and the efforts in spirit for how this new earth is coming forth. I've seen that multiple times come through as well in my regressions. It seems to keep being highlighted. And interestingly, when there's work to be done with the land, when I've been moving around, especially with Angela, will often you see them, like the collection of them within, the energy, the sky, and everything will become very overcast, and I can feel them around us. And then we'll do what we have to do with the land and activate the land, and then all of a sudden it's a bright blue sky again. And it's happened way too many times to be a fluke. It blows my mind. As I said, I've got this human mind that's going, is this real? Is this like for sure? But it just keeps happening. So I'm like going, okay, let's keep doing this.
Susan, was there not a photograph taken at one of the meetings? Was it Raluca that took the photograph, and you could see orbs
Yes.
all over the sky, over a bright blue
That was
daylight sky?
excellent. Yeah,
Orbs
absolutely.
everywhere.
That was phenomenal, wasn't it? Absolutely. Yeah, and I think even in the clues that, even I want to say small, but it's not actually smaller, but the clues that people are given daily for the signs for guiding us to where we should be. And a lot of people just are choosing not to recognize, or they're not seeing it. It's almost like they're walking around with, I don't know, just, like with blinkers on or something like that. Whereas, when we're bringing in those codes and opening up the light, it's like opening up the vision so that they can see and respond, and therefore make the different choices that connect them to feeling whole again. And that's I think where the big difference is. So I think I'm just essentially a bit of a gateway, a bit of an activator. So I activate the codes in people and help bring back that light. So it sets the path to freedom to, I guess, awaken into what's real, what's true, what's anchored here rather than just in the head and reactive through the wounded energy.
So that session where this happened, and it's like a threshold moment for you. What after that session took you time to then, obviously you had to process what happened. What was it about that session? Because obviously we haven't discussed it, and hopefully we will at the end. You work with different modalities, but what was it about that session where you felt the shift?
It was on all parts of me. It wasn't just a spiritual thing. It was actual physical reaction, like that was so severe on all levels. Like it was a purging of my physical body in ways that you can't deny what it was doing, trying to get rid of that energy and what had been, like John said, stitched in. Because I actually remember that looking like something was just stitching me constantly back into that bed and stopping my body from, well, my light from coming back out on connecting in. I don't even know how to describe it properly, to be honest.
So that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think the reintegration of that light with the body and the shift through what that does to the energy networks within the body as well. We got all these different energetic bodies. So everything having to then recalibrate into that new light that's suddenly able to come in, and the shift in the vibration in this physical vessel was massive and I'd say probably even 3-4 weeks after. And then recognizing how the codes that were coming in were continuing to activate through my own client work, because I'm constantly looking, constantly asking, listening, being aware, and that then coming into my awareness and being able to go, they kept showing me, spirit just constantly showing me, because this happened, this is unfolding, because that happened, this is unfolding, because that happened. So it created all these chain reactions that even now go back to that point. Spirit shows me very clearly, and hence the amount of gratitude. And yeah, every time I see you, John, it's just like, yeah.
Of that experience, there's probably what you can perceive as, you saw the insects and let's just say what we might say negative side of things, do you have an understanding? Obviously, at that level, there is no positive and negative, but we can interpret certain, being limited for one. Was that, then was that scary? Was it fearful? Can you tell us a bit more about how you felt about that? Or was that the session where that was left behind?
I think, like, part of my healing journey in itself has been a lot of recognizing the darker side of energy, but then growing into understanding also what we are co-creating in our own mind because of that trauma that we carry versus what is actually something that's demonic or dark aliens or whatever else. And I think from that session, I was terrified, in short, because to see that something else could be controlling our soul in that way was really scary. And to think that we come into a physical vessel and it's like, we know, like, obviously I felt like I should be connecting to something more. So why can't I connect to it when I'm doing all the right things as we do? So what is it that's going on? And then to see that level of, I don't know, betrayal. Is that what it is? It's like betrayal on a soul level, that's something that wants to work against the light. And it just keeps taking me back to those wars in spirit of the light against dark. And it doesn't matter whether you're here or there, or there's this ongoing conflict, isn't there? And what side do you want to choose? What choices do you want to make? Where do you want to sit? But somewhere in between, sometimes we get caught in the crossfire, and I've seen it more times than that, even with other souls now, as I've opened to more light, to be able to help those other souls in a similar context where they haven't been able to help themselves, where it's been generally associated to the wars in spirit and that ongoing conflict of light versus dark, I guess. But I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
I said at the beginning of this, you do explain things in a way that I wouldn't be able to. So yeah, I'm really interested in this because, when you have these amazing experiences, depending on what your life has been and what you're open and what you're understanding, your cultural background, you're also going to get the darker or exposure to that. And it takes time to actually get over it and be able to live with it before you then want to go further on your journey because, you're only shown things when you're ready. But once you've seen them as a human, as a 3D human, it can take time for you to integrate or accept that the darker side of things exist. And we will talk about that in future sessions. But yeah, yours, from what John was describing, it's such a threshold moment. But seeing, you know, darker aliens limiting your light, saying it's easy, but feeling and experiencing that, it'll be terrible, you know?
I do, and I think it's been an ongoing conflict with that whole alien abduction sort of context of there's been this, like before that moment as well, there was always this conflict of people going, the galactic's this, and I'm channeling this, and I was always like, no, don't want anything to do with any of them. So then to hear that I'm coordinating these galactics is like, yeah, right, as if that's happening, because I actually don't want anything to do with any of them. But I actually, since that session, did another session where I was focused purely on, understanding why that, besides what I experienced there, but what else had gone on and how do I create resolution for that? Because essentially the fear is going to only create a resonance that blocks us from connecting to our own truth. So it's better to understand and reconcile and move forward than to just block it out completely, because that's not going to help us move forward. So when I that session of understanding the darkness as well as the light and creating resolution where it needed to, closing down any contracts that I'd left open or, that was still hanging around from those wars in spirit as we spoke about, then I can truly embrace the light, and I can now feel the light of the galactics coming through. And if they are of a positive resonance, Spirit actually showed me, which I don't know how weird that sounds, but they showed me how to, like, all light is made up of multiple colors. So they showed me how to split the light so I can see the full spectrum of the light. And therefore, I can check the resonance of what's coming in and see if it's pure or if it's not pure. And therefore, I can accept and invite them in, or I can go, no, thank you, and send them on their way and not have to deal with them, which has been really, really enlightening for me to be able to recognize and see things in that way as well.
Yeah, I think that's the more you do quantum healing and you have an exposure. It happened in one of my sessions where I thought I was talking to the higher self, but the whole time it was a tricky demonic character. But it has to happen so you understand it, then you can feel what's happening for the next one. That, okay, yeah, I can see what's happening here. So continual learning. So John, that was quite early on in this. The session with Susan was quite early on, and you said you almost went into a channeling state. So how as a practitioner did you absorb such a, a session of such magnitude? You know, Susan hasn't really told much about what she does and who she is, but hopefully at the end, but you knew. So for that to happen, how could you reconcile that and understand what happened?
Kind of just took it in my stride, Cam. I was delighted. I was delighted that I was at the other end of it without too much trauma for Susan, I think. And I didn't just sort of pull the plug on the session and say, right, I can't deal with that. So I was really satisfied with myself that I'd kind of kept going, hoping that something I would find that wee hook that would get me to move from the horrible chaotic scenes to find the next step. And I did find that. And then when the more I thought about it, it was almost like a 2 minute of channeling where I kept a kind of dialogue going of what was happening with the light, and we're taking it towards Susan. And I was kind of keeping up this end, and the archangels or the dragons were doing it in that end, and I just kept it going, and it gives me a bit of confidence, I suppose, that in those situations in the future that I can probably rely on that type of response when someone's needing that kind of help, that I'll be able to deal with it. And as Angela said, after I described that, there were quite a few people going that day after we had told the story, I could never have dealt with that sort of story or that situation. And Angela said, well, John was given it because to show he was ready for it. So I was delighted I was ready for it I think Susan was maybe my 7th or 8th client at that point. So it was quite early on in my learning. But I got it, and Susan come through it kind of unscathed, I hope. But I remember.
And I think, like Angela said, like most people would just find a way out, but you kept pushing through. And I think that's been a lot of my gratitude, because you did actually not just close down the session. This is too hard. This is too scary. You actually, went no, and you called in the help. And that's where, the real energy and the real power of the light lay. It's not within us personally. It's within being the channel for the divine to come through.
Yeah. And I was delighted that kind of came. It was almost second nature. I mean, Susan's mentioning the dragons gave me the clue. That's what I thought, right, it's the light dragons. I'll do something with the light in it. And because learning for you, Cam, in our very first weekend, and you spoke about light and love to get out of these tough situations, that was where that planted the seed with me originally. So, and I'd used it before with Michelle, and then I really had to use it and bring even more to it in this situation, and just really pleased that I came out of it. And I mean, that night we were sitting about, I think we were having dinner or whatever we were doing that evening, and I was trying to catch your eye, Susan, across the table. You were just sitting spaced out, and for 5 minutes, I'm like, get to your bed, but trying to discreetly say, go away, kind of thing, because you were just sitting like staring into space. You just couldn't participate on what the rest of us were doing because you were, and it just brought home exactly what you had went through and what I had sort of experienced that day.
And don't you think that's the testament as well, when people are not really fully conceptualizing when they're connecting through a QHHT session and they're connecting to that quantum healing, they're not realizing the impact it's having in the day-to-day, then moving forward, how it fluctuates through the emotions, through the mental body, as your body needs to, release and purge, and what that's actually doing, I don't think perhaps there's enough information sometimes out there about that after effect of, we ask for healing, but for that healing to come through, you do actually have to clear out the dense energy. And what does that look like for that person to be able to make way for that light to then return?
Yeah. For people coming to quantum sessions, who don't know too much about it, it's their first time. Sometimes it can be a little scary, and there's a lot of nerves. I was the first time I had it done on me. I kind of was, very skeptical as well. But you're only ever gonna receive and hear what you can handle. So on that note, Susan, let's learn a little bit more about yourself, because you're not going to be shown that you're a light being that's here from creation, battling the dark forces without a bit of a backstory. So let's have a listen.
Well, I've been on this journey for it was 10 years in August actually, and I've been dealing with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, so basically pain and exhaustion for most of my life actually. Even as a little tacker, I always had pain and unexplainable. No one could make sense of it, and by the time I ended up going to get help, it was kind of like I was having a good day if I had half an hour even without debilitating pain. It was at a point where I couldn't think or function on really any level. And so I took a punt, and it's actually really funny to think about how embarrassed I was to walk into the crystal shop that day, considering it's my whole life now. But that day that I walked in and asked for seeing if someone would do past life healings, because I'd read the book Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss. And I thought, maybe, just maybe. I ended up with a Reiki practitioner, and her name was Pamela. And she was just amazing. And I would go back week after week and have these energy sessions. But she was an absolute saint, and she just charged me what I could afford. I really didn't have any money. And each week I was knocked flat, like literally, when we talk about, the body releasing what can, to make room for the light. And I literally was just knocked flat every week. And then I would go back and do it again. And pretty soon I was just like starting to feel better, and I could think and I could function, and I was changing my diet, and I was really like, I couldn't meditate, but I was really, there's this thing called meditation, and I've got to learn how to meditate. And, people say you should be grounding. What is this grounding? And I was looking for, things that would talk me through it, and any resources I could. And just anything that came into my path that was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And I was pretty keen to get well at this point. And so I very quickly decided I needed to learn how to do Reiki, because that, if someone could do that for me, I wanted to do that for someone else. And I've never really wanted it for anything. I've just managed to, in my life, a bit of jack of all trades, done this, done that. And anyway, I trained into my Reiki 1, Reiki 2, did crystal Reiki. And at that point, then I moved over to UK from Australia. And I continued through any resources I could get hold of while I was working over here. It was I think moving was a really huge step for me as far as letting go of everything in the past, because I sold my house, I sold everything I own, and I moved over with just 2 of my 4 children, and it was just a clean break. And nobody knew me over here, so I could essentially redesign who I am here and now. And as soon as I started my business, and Spirit goes, you're going to need to start a business. And I'm going, you're joking, right? I know nothing. And they say, yeah, you know enough. And I'm like, okay. And so I started my business, and I was going to start bringing people into the house, and then I was only renting. And they went, no, you can't do that. And I'm like, okay, no worries. And so Spirit says, started online. And I'm like, what? You're joking. And anyway, so here I was trying to build myself a website. So I built myself a website, and I had like 3 timed sessions on my site, like, 15-minute, 30-minute, 60-minute Reiki. Okay, no worries. So I started doing that. Couldn't pay my own fees the first year. Second year, doubled, and then I just kept building clients. And so word of mouth, I've never advertised, but just word of mouth, where people were obviously getting a response from the energy that was coming through. But I think for me, starting the business so quickly, so I advertised myself as a psychic medium and energy healer. I was healing through the people that were being sent to me, because Spirit was showing me what I was not seeing myself. So I would get a run of people who all had this problem or all had that problem. And I was, okay, I need to fix this on myself. Okay, no worries. And I was getting the clues, and I was listening. And Spirit always showed me I never really watched YouTube. I didn't really do a lot of courses with anybody else I never really did much of any of that because they just showed me lessons from spirit. So I'd sit down and I would just listen and type and channel the information, and then I'd read it back and I'm like going, oh, right, yeah, okay, no worries, we can do that, no worries. So part of my journey as well, I was translating everything I was learning into dowsing charts. So a lot of what I saw, understood, I just kept putting into these dowsing charts so that it could help empower others, because I kept hearing you need to help others, not just heal them, but so they can be empowered to heal themselves. So this is really these spiritual tools that making pendulums, making the charts, and it's just more of a passion on the side of the healing that I can do. But yeah, the psychic medium and energy healing, I think over the 10 years, it was very incremental, and the growth was just beautiful, because I think my clients were my gift. If it wasn't for my clients, I wouldn't have seen exactly and been stretched to understand and know what I needed to know to be able to help them. And then when QHHT came onto my radar in 2024, and it was the beginning of the year, and I was like, yes, definitely. My whole body told me I needed to do that. And so I jumped on board with that. And then in the August, met Angela doing these QHHT meetups for practitioners. And that, again, as soon as I met Angela and saw what she was doing, I'm going, there's more to this. I said, this isn't just about the individuals. It's not just about the groups. This is about the land. This is Gaia calling back. And we're in the throes of this new earth ascension and what's coming forth from that. And so being able to offer that different perspective, so we could see where to take the groups to start opening up these light portals and bring in the energy and the healing to the grids, just totally, I think, elevated things again, because we were accessing, I don't know, it's like people are drawn to certain places, and through those people we're all coming together and we're all co-creating together. And this is exactly, it's kind of like watching fireworks, and it's just magical. I love it because I visually am able to see, well, third eye, see those codes that are interconnecting, and how it's almost like unlocking each person in a new and different way as we connect with each other. But like, above all things, what I've learned is that we're stronger together. And as soon as we stop being individual and we start, whether we're the healer to help the healer, or we're someone just starting out looking for that light to, get a leg in on just finding your way in life, I think, we all hold value, and it's just being brave enough to take that step. I think I'm living proof, though, that miracles happen, because from where I was, where I couldn't think outside of a wet paper bag, I would stand at the front door and go, I so desperately want to walk, and I just didn't even have the energy to step out the front door. I'd get out of the shower and be like, I need to rest. What can I cancel in my day? Because I just don't have the energy. I was debilitated on every level, to where I'm now living so healthy and vibrant. And when my sister turned around to me at Christmas Day and she goes, where do you get this energy from? And I'm like, I know, I healed myself. I'm so happy. What can I say? Just, yeah, incredible.
Fibro, when, I've had a lot of clients myself with fibro, and it's so debilitating and it's so misunderstood, because, you'll know this, everyone around you has very little patience for people, because they're just like, because there's such a lack of understanding. But I think maybe that's why so many people with the condition are drawn to spirituality, because of this unknown. And then also there's so much healings that happen, and it is transformational. So it's wonderful to hear. But what I'm interested in, you said spirit told you. How did spirit tell you?
It was interesting. I first started when I come over into UK. I was working with the emotion code by, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name at the moment, but it's a certain modality, and I was working with that. And through every time I had a pain or I had a block, like, I would be like, I want to draw, like I want to draw. So why am I still looking at a blank piece of paper half an hour after I open a book? And these sort of things. Every time there was something, I would be like, okay, what is the emotion? What is the stuck emotion behind this? And I was using the emotion code to understand and release and reset through my body wherever it needed to be released. And it was very quickly apparent that as I was doing that, I was jumping into past lives and going, it sources from there. And I kept being slingshotted into all these other past lives, which was absolutely fascinating for me, having been so, blocked from the fibro. And that just, the more the dense emotion released, the more and more aware I became. And very quickly then, as I just call them spirit, because I never really focused on one team member. Like, I did go through a spot where I was like, well, who's with me? Is it, and what's your name? But it very quickly became apparent that the team or the person, the entity that is required to be with me at that time to teach me something, it's, they will step in. I just need to ask the question, and it's kind of like being on speed dial. So once I started understanding that, and they just kept encouraging, communicate with spirit, that's where the most pure information is, because that's where you learn about you and what your abilities are, rather than learning from someone else and their abilities, which you're trying to fit. And it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. It doesn't work. You can get a leg in by going, okay, I'm starting to wake up, but what you really need is to learn about you. And that's where your team's gifted to you, because they teach you. They're the ones who know your path forward. They know you better than anyone or anything. So just trusting. And in the beginning, it may have only been a few lines that I could actually connect with and understand, but I would just keep practicing and keep doing it and keep listening. And and that connection with my teams grew and grew and grew.
When did you pass um the point where you believed, like you thought, instead of, there's one point where you think I'm going crazy, is it just, when was it for you where you thought, okay, this is the truth, I'm going for this, and it's exciting, there's a lot of momentum, and you try all the modalities. When was that?
Well, actually, for me, it was very early in the piece. It was actually pretty much when I decided to go to the crystal shop, because prior to that, having been ill for, by that time I was just over 40 years old, and having lived that long with pain, and through my 30s was when the chronic fatigue really set in, and I was, dealing with that exhaustion, not just the pain. It was at that point I just decided I didn't want to live like that anymore, and I had done everything logical, and all the logical stuff had just made me feel insane. Like, they just were so belittling the medical the merry-go-round, the medical merry-go-round. I wouldn't know how else to term it. But I just kept going around in circles, and I wasn't getting anything. And so it was actually at that point I went, no, I'm not going to trust anything that is just the logical path. I'm just going to believe. And I'm just putting it all out there, spirit, just, I'm going to believe, and I want to get better. And this is what's unfolded from that. So from day one, I literally went, yep, I'm just doing it that way. And that's what got me here.
That's brilliant. That's great. I think, like, for me personally, maybe with yourself, John, you to get to the point where you surrender to God, to surrender to the divine, that's when things start happening. Relinquish control.
I suppose that weekend that I met Susan and went through that experience, I think that's where I eventually said, right, I can do this. And I suppose I don't know whether I was relinquishing control or what I was doing, but I said, I'm going for it. So I believed in myself, or I believed that my team had my back, or my guys had my back from that point forward, because I went through the session that I had with Susan, and I've never looked back since. And now I'm on a podcast, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I never have thought that 16 months ago.
Oh yeah, I remember the session I had with John, Susan. So kind of, with new people, I'm not the best. So John was doing a session with me, and I already had my, do I really want to do this kind of hat on? But I went for it. But as it transpired, it was such a deep healing what John was able to provide. And I now know that after just that one, I don't know, a few hours that we had, and I had a quantum session as the client, John did an amazing job. But the healing was so deep that something switched in me, that I could have gone home. I did actually leave a day early, and then I could have gone home, and just that session, it almost like reignited a bit of a lull that I was in, and especially facing darkness and experiences and not being able to get over that, and or understand it. So yeah, although not as you know old as the experience you had, it's just the healing is just as deep because it's just what I needed. And I think clients, when they come to the quantum session, they do get what they want. To be open, to be vulnerable, to be healed, to be understood, to be seen for something greater than they are. It's such a beautiful process. I'm just looking at the time now, and I know we've kind of gone off on a bit, but there's so much more that you guys can talk about. So I think perhaps we should pick that up on another one if you guys are both with me.
More than
Definitely, yeah.
happy for that.
Oh yeah, and it's been great hearing his experiences. Never a disappointment. So much amazing things, and we'll hopefully learn more about your backstory as well. I think people being able to relate to being in, having a medical condition and being in constant pain and confusion, to actually knowing that there's still so much life to live. I think that's really important that we share that type
You
of
know,
thing.
if I could, I actually have, I think, almost realized that those that are the most subdued sometimes really have a lot to shine when they move through that, because there is such a humbling from living with such a disability. Really, it teaches you something that I think many people wouldn't otherwise learn, which is why we all deal with what we deal with. On some level, everyone deals with something, don't they? It's just being brave enough to allow yourself to take that step.
Definitely, we're all searching for something, and I don't. There's a phrase which I can't remember because it's been recorded, but along the lines of, if you've been addicted to drugs or alcohol or whatever through your life, it's almost better because you're looking for something and you can find it, and that was your way of looking. If you haven't, then there's less. There's a lot less understanding as a professional, a spiritual professional. Experience can be, and how we might think, that's not a problem. Fibro is a great example of feeling tired again, and just so little empathy, but realizing that what is it truly like for someone that told to wake up, to interact with family members. There's so much in there. Maybe we can get someone in who worked with Susan. Who would be willing to share a story of you know going down the medical approach and opening up to something greater, and then what happens, how it snowballs.
Mm.
I think we can really explore what Susan offers, all our other talents. There's probably so much, because that weekend that I first met you, Susan, you were the star of the show for everyone because you were so generous. You were so generous with your time, whether it was with your dowsing rods or pendulums or cards and everything, and just giving so much of your abilities to people that were novices and who hadn't really been in these circles an awful lot. So to be in your presence and you be so given with your knowledge in particular, but then with all your other abilities, it was mesmerising. It was a real treat to be there, even outside of the QHHT. I just mean, just when we were hanging about the kitchen and you were always sharing and we were always learning. And I'm just, what Susan saying now, making sure I wasn't missing anything that you were sharing with people, just so that I was learning the whole time. So it'd be great to get her on again, Kam, and actually just dig into what you offer your clients and what all the different things you do. We could easily fill an hour with that, I think.
Definitely do that, assuming you want to, Susan.
Oh, yes, please.
That has flown by. Just personally, one thing throughout my development is feeling energy, and it was really strong in the session so whatever's been going on, I'm sure there's some healing, so I'm going to be excited to listen to this one back before I do the AI edits to make us look cool. Thank you, John. Brilliant as always. Thank you, Susan.
Thank
And
you.
we'll see you on the next one.
Very
Cheers, dude.
much.